On Tuesday, September 26th, people in Boston will have a chance to pick finalists for 3 open seats on the Boston City Council. One of them is in District 7, currently represented by Tito Jackson. This includes most of Roxbury and parts of Dorchester, the South End, and the Fenway. Among those hoping to be the new councilor is our guest, Kim Janey. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Kim, this is your first run as a candidate, but you've been very much involved in politics, advocacy, activism. Talk about your background.
Well, I'm born and raised in Roxbury. I also have very strong ties to the South End community. Born into a family of educators and activists who taught me the importance of leadership, advocacy, protest. I became a community organizer, and so I have a long tradition of activism in my family and in terms of my own career, fighting for children and families in Boston.
Now, I mean, there's a lot you can accomplish doing that. So what's the difference between that and how it would feel for you to be a city councilor?
I think in terms of running for city council, this provides an opportunity to have a greater impact. It's really a natural extension of my own advocacy that I have been doing, but it allows me to have a greater impact for families across the city, but particularly for District 7, which is Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, and Fenway.
Well, one thing I'm sure you've heard within the district and even outside it is that there are a lot of parents concerned about budget cuts in the schools, even though the city's budgeting more of its own money. What would you like to do about that problem?
Well, certainly continue my advocacy for education and making sure that our schools are fully funded so we can take care of the needs of all of the students in Boston. And that's just one issue in terms of education. So my background in terms of professionally, I'm the Senior Project Director at Mass Advocates for Children. I lead the education policy work there, advocating to eliminate opportunity and achievement gaps for Boston children. And I think resources and funding for our schools could go a long way in helping us do that.
Because one flashpoint out there now is what it costs for teachers who are not getting reassigned in the Boston schools. That's yet to be thrashed out in the next teacher's contract, but what would you like to see done around that?
Well, I think we need to support our teachers. We need to make sure that they have access to coaching and development. We need to respect our teachers and pay them a real living wage. I would love to see more teacher diversity. I've been advocating for teacher diversity to make sure that the school department lives up to its goal of making sure our teachers reflect the rich diversity of the student body, and that's something that we have not done yet. And I think it also helps in terms of eliminating opportunity and achievement gaps.
Of course, I'm sure you've also heard a lot about the high cost of housing, people being displaced, I'm sure some from this district. What would you like to do? For instance, maybe increase tenant protections from evictions?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that we can do, what the City Council can do, and certainly what I'm promoting, is passing the Jim Brooks Stabilization Act, which would give greater protections to tenants. One of the reasons I decided to run for City Council is because our community is at a crossroads. We have an economic boom happening throughout the city of Boston, but yet, people are being left out of the opportunity. We have growing income inequality, the cost of living is too high, and people are really being pushed right out of their homes, right out of their communities. And so making sure that we have the right mix of housing where families can afford to stay, that we have jobs that pay a real living wage, that we have strong schools for our children and services and programs for our seniors are very important. And those are the things that I will fight for as the next Boston City Councilor for District 7.
This is BNN News. We're talking with a candidate for City Council in District 7, Kim Janey. Kim, talk about, you mentioned the mix of housing. There's one proposal on Townsend Street that's been arousing some controversy. People they're talking about density, that they want to see affordable units on site, and they're worried about whether there's enough parking. So sometimes people say that this is too much for the neighborhood to handle.
No, that's exactly what I've heard on the doors as well in that area, that density, parking, and affordability remain the top 3 sticking points for that proposal. And so I think it's really important to make sure that the voices of the residents, particularly those who abut that property, are heard
Well, I know one thing that's going on is that Mayor Walsh in recent years has sort of, raised the bar on contributions to affordable housing from developments. There are some advocates out there saying we need to push that bar even higher to get more affordable units. Do you think we should do that?
I think we do need more affordable units, but we also need the right mix of housing. There are so many families, particularly in District 7 in Roxbury and throughout the district, who earn too much to qualify for a subsidy, but don't earn enough to pay for market rate rent. And so we need to make sure that we're taking care of those families who are in the middle and are being squeezed out. We also need more opportunity for home ownership throughout the community. And right now, District 7 has the lowest home ownership in terms of owner-occupied. So it's 18% owner-occupied versus 81% renter-occupied. And it makes it really, the community is very vulnerable because of that. And so making sure there's opportunity for working families to purchase their own home will go a long way too in stabilizing our community.
One thing District 7 is affected by is the increase in shootings. I know definitely homicides are up in Area B2 this year. Even though violence overall is down, what about the shootings? What do we need to do about that?
So I think we need to make sure we have the right partnerships in place, that we are looking at strategies that actually work, looking back at what was successful in the past, making sure that we have opportunity for people. I mean, violence is a product of poverty in many cases and lack of opportunity, and so making sure that we're doing much more to kind of break that cycle of poverty. I think we also have to address trauma in our community, and because hurt people hurt other people, and we need to make sure that we're dealing with the trauma in our neighborhoods. And I think building stronger relationships with the police could also help us through.
There was a recent report about stops by the police, sometimes just to ask questions, sometimes to pat down, or even to just observe. And there's still a racial disparity there. It's mainly black people who are being stopped like this or encountered like this, even though these encounters in total are down. What do you feel about the gap?
So I feel like in all areas we need to eliminate disparities around race. And so you can go back looking at education again and see racial disparities and how children are disciplined at a very early age, as young as preschool. And that's a problem, and it seems to continue into young adulthood, teenagers, and adulthood. And so we need to break those racial disparities. I think it would go a long way for the police department to release data around the number of times people are stopped. They're saying, I've heard, at least read in the paper, that it's an inflated number because we're just targeting certain problem areas, and there are repeated stops there. So let's put that data out and let's understand what it's actually saying.
We should finally mention you have a website that people can go to get some more information?
Yes, www.kimjaney.org. Certainly invite people to look at my website. Certainly would love to earn the votes of people in my community, Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, and Fenway, for September 26th.